Hey everyone, welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in sunny Los Angeles, California. I've been here for over a year and a half and still struggling to enjoy this place. Hey, we're fostering a dog right now though, so that is making this a little more palatable. It's a lot of work having a dog. We're a cat family. Anyway, hey, you don't want to hear about that. You want to hear my guest today. Very excited about this one. This is Rosie Tucker. Let me tell you her bio. Originally from the San Fernando Valley, Rosie Tucker is now based in Los Angeles proper. She is one quarter of the post-rock band Gypsum, and though only in her early 20s, she's written 2 albums under her own name. Low Light was released in 2015, and her latest, Never Not, Never Not, Never Not, will be released this March on New Professor Music. It's great. It's easily one of my favorite albums so far this year. I was about to say, I stopped for a second. I was like, it'll definitely end up on my top 10. No one cares about my top 10. Maybe when I wrote for Dusted. I used to be a music critic, and I wrote for a really great website that was kind of like a very indie version of Pitchfork. I mean, now Pitchfork does what? Like Kanye and Cardi B reviews. But, Dusted still exists. But, a lot of free jazz and weird indie rock and new folk and all that kind of stuff. But, yes. So let's pretend that I am a critic with a top 10 you might care about. Rosie Tucker's new album will be on that list because it is great. And I was very excited. She lives here in Los Angeles. I was excited to find that out. And what a great talk. I don't want to spoil too much. And by that, I mean I don't want to make this introduction way too long. But I'll tease something. She grew up or had a detour in her teenage years into evangelical Christianity, and we talk a lot about that and about a ton of other stuff. Not only is Rosie a great musician, but she is smart and cool, and so I hope you enjoy this one. By the way, if this is your first time listening to the show, thanks for checking it out. I would also encourage you to check out some other episodes. Now, if you are here because you like indie rock, what about other episodes that I've done with musicians? Here's just a sampling. I've probably done over 100 or more episodes with musicians. Scott Camberg from Pavement was on an episode. Allison Crutchfield from Swearin' was on one. And a live show that I did in New York years ago, Swearin' was on that episode, and they played some music, and it was very cool. Mitski has been on the show. Tim Kinsella, Matt Sharp from Weezer, The Blow, they were on last week. Wonderful. Mira has been on the show before, and a lot of other people, a lot of actors and writers and artists, a philosopher or two have been on the show. So if you like what you hear and you want to check out all those episodes, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts. You can also find episodes on Stitcher and Google Play and Spotify. The last 100 should be on whatever your podcast app is, but all of them are on Spotify, and all of them are also at beginnings.libsyn.com if you want to just download them like that. What else? You can also find me on Instagram and Twitter at Andy Beckerman, and if you want to see me live, my dear, sweet Naomi and I do a show together once a month here in Los Angeles and sometimes around the country, called Couples Therapy, where we have stand-ups who are close, do sets together about their relationship. The next one is this Saturday at 8 p.m. at the Virgil. Garfunkel Notes are going to be on, and a lot of other cool people, but I'm very excited. So if you want to get tickets, go to couplestherapypod.com and click on the See Us Live link. If you don't live in Los Angeles, you can also hear this. It's a podcast called Couples Therapy, and you can find that on the How Stuff Works network. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for checking us out. Episode 400 is coming up. Should be a good one. Very excited. So stay tuned. Thanks again for listening. Hope your lives are not terrible, even though we live in a dystopia. Well, yes, of course. Always have to end these on a down note. But you know what's an up note? This interview with Rosie. Enjoy.
I think that I've always been a very emotional person, a lot of ups and downs. And so I think that as a kid, I was fairly dreamy and in my head a lot with occasional,
I identify with that, yes.
mood issues. Yeah.
What mood issues in what way?
I think that I would sometimes feel things in a pretty extreme way. I was pretty sensitive. Mm-hmm. I'm the baby of the family. So when I got my feelings hurt, I think I made a big deal about it. I'm still oversensitive much of the time.
Yes, I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely like even the smallest things. I was... my wife and I are writing something together. Just a note. Like she made some note on something and I bristled at it and I had to just tell myself in my head she's just making a note of something. Mm-hmm. Like it's not like a deep criticism of you as a person. So just deal with it instead of overreacting.
Yes. I think that as artists it is very easy to identify ourselves with everything that we create, and then when you bring somebody into that space, if they don't, for me at least, if the reaction is not complete affirmation, sometimes I have to really work to remind myself that everything is fine.
I could only find a couple things about you online, literally one thing about you online. Where you graduated from. You also started a program, or you co-founded a group for women and non-binary musicians. Those are the only things I could find. Zero biographical pieces of information about you. Where are you from? What's your hometown like?
Yeah, I think that some of that was fairly intentional because I feel like I'm from the San Fernando Valley. From West Hills in the San Fernando Valley, and that strikes me as particularly uninteresting in the city of Los Angeles, and so I think I just have sort of left a lot of that out in hopes that the music will speak for itself.
Well, I don't even know anything about Los Angeles, really. I've been here for about a year and a half. And
shit, really?
I know almost nothing.
Oh, okay.
So I don't even, when you said San Fernando Valley, I'm just like... In my head, I'm like, is that the valley?
That's the valley. Yes. Excellent. Okay. Well, the valley is a magical place where the strip mall was invented in the valley, for example.
And then spread out to every other part of Los Angeles.
Yes. It was planned. The valley was planned sort of a suburbia that grew up in the post-war period. It was designed to look like the Midwest. It doesn't, but there used to be orange groves, and now there are suburban houses. I am from West Hills, which is in the very west of the valley. West Hills was part of Canoga Park until the year 1992, and I think that there's some kind of redlining situation because Canoga Park is a majority-minority area, and then West Hills was created, and suddenly it was 92% white. So that happens to be where my parents bought their house, I think probably in 92 or 91.
So intentionally.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that you probably contact a realtor and they showed you a house in the region where they thought you were supposed to buy a house. I think that's part of how redlining works.
Here's where all the white people are living.
Yeah, you seem to be white. We're going to put you here.
Well, actually, we're part Latinx. Oh. Oh boy.
I guess 2 blocks that way. It's the same houses, but so that's where I grew up.
So wait, so how did your parents end up there?
My parents ended up there. My parents ended up in Southern California they met in Seal Beach, Orange County. I'm not telling this in a very organized way. But my mother grew up on a farm in Illinois. And her father was a farmer and a tampon factory worker. And her mother, my grandmother, was a occasionally employed typist and also farmed. And my father grew up partly in California. He was one of 7. They moved around a whole lot. He sometimes will say he's sort of from Kentucky because he went to high school there. My father ended up back in Southern California through the Marines because he went to college on a Marine scholarship and then ended up stationed in Southern California. And my mother ended up in Southern California working for an aerospace company.
Okay, yeah.
She's a computer programmer, which is fairly unusual for a farm girl, but she's an amazing person.
How did she go from farm girl to working class farm girl to computer programmer?
She took a class in college. She has talked about how her parents thought that she was not very bright, and they would say, we hope that you can either get through typing school or find someone to marry. But she was going to a small college near where she grew up, and they had a single computer programming class. And she talks about how she programmed a very simple Christmas tree image, and she could make the lights blink on and off. And so she transferred to U of I because they had a computer science major. And she was so excited about this Christmas tree and all its potential. And then she had a sister who had moved to California, so she applied to a bunch of jobs in California, knowing nothing. Her sister was in Northern California, but she didn't understand the geography of the place. So
I mean, I didn't until I got here. I mean, listening to like Pavement songs is like the closest I had ever gotten to understanding the differences between Northern and Southern California. But is this the 80s? Like, when is she in college?
She's in college. She moved here in the 80s, so I guess she would have graduated. I don't know what year she graduated college. I don't want to guess, because if she hears this, she'll be mad.
I'm just trying to figure out, because you're a lot younger than me, so I'm trying to do the math of like, is she my contemporary? Or
nah, she's born in 61.
Okay, good.
So
good. It doesn't no offense to your mother, but it does not make me feel too old then myself.
Yeah, no offense to my mother.
There's no, you can't control when you're born.
No.
So,
No.
But I'm just trying, so she's like the first wave, because like what I was trying to do in my head was like, she's like kind of the first wave of programmers, and the first wave especially of like women programmers, because of, look, I'm basing this on like my knowledge of *Halt and Catch Fire*, which was about, female programmers in the 80s. So
Wait, really?
Yeah.
I'm very curious. For someone who was raised by a programmer, I have incredibly limited knowledge of how any of that works.
It's a great show. It's one of my favorites. I just, cool. I talked to a writer on the show, and hopefully I think the creators of the show will be on here at some point, but, it's a genuinely wonderful show, and it has, it looks at a part of history that I had no idea about. Mm-hmm. It's well worth your time. But yeah, so I didn't know. So like, there's this, early, in the 80s was like the first real wave of people doing programming the way we think of it now, like beeps and boops and sing in front of a Commodore 64 or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that your mom?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I don't know what she did in the aerospace company. I know she got the job by guessing at a math problem.
Go on.
She the story goes that she walked into the interview and they had a thing on the board and she looked at it and she said a number and it was the right answer. And they said, well, you have a job here.
So she like basically Goodwill Hunting.
She Goodwill Huntinged her first job in Los Angeles. Yeah, she did. Very remarkable woman.
So,
she almost failed college too. She had to ask them to count. She's like a painter. She had to ask them to count an art credit toward her programming degree because she was like working multiple jobs the whole time and failed all of the math classes. It was math and programming major. So
what is it? The aesthetic part of programming that she is interested in? Because you said the Christmas tree thing.
I think it's the systems piece of it. I don't think that she necessarily has a love of math, but I think that she has a love of systems. She says that if she hadn't figured out computer programming, she would have enjoyed being a car mechanic a lot. So she likes to tinker and see how things work. And she does have a creative bent. I think that those things combined make it really attractive to her.
I mean, again, not again, but I say this a lot on the show. I don't try to find like a linear kind of like, well, this is your childhood, therefore you were like this. But I do think that's an interesting kind of like foundation for a musician, is having one of your parents interested in systems, specifically, which is, you know, it's very much part of writing music. I mean, the mechanical part of it, but also like the painting kind of stuff, which also like the creative stuff also like along with the system stuff, I think is a good foundation for becoming a musician.
Definitely. And I think, I mean, she's an entrepreneur. So I think what my mother has is a willingness to envision an idea and then follow it far past any reasonable point. And commit to it completely in order to realize it. And I think that is something that has definitely impacted me artistically. Yeah.
Is she an emotional person, or is she more of like the kind of like, in my mind, the typical programmer, the stereotypical programmer?
No, she's very good at talking to people. She's very emotional, fun to hang out with. She likes clothes. She's got pink hair.
Okay. Yeah. So she's also a little bit iconoclastic.
Yeah. There should probably be a comic book about her at some point.
So how did she meet your father?
She met my dad in a laundromat in Seal Beach. She was taking a break from dating, but they talked and she said, "Do you want my number or not?" Because he was too shy to ask for it. And then he called her when she got home from the laundromat, and they started hanging out.
Because I'm trying to figure out, how does the Marine end up with the programmer with pink hair?
I think that she was having a good time in Seal Beach, kind of maybe partying a lot. And my dad was stationed there. I don't know. I think my dad is a lot more than a Marine. He was a Marine for many years. He is also a lover of literature and of poetry and of learning. And he is an Episcopalian chaplain at LA County USC Hospital, is like his more recent turn of life. So he's also had a very varied existence.
Did he have a calling at some point, or was he always religious? When you were you born into Episcopalianism?
No, both of my parents were raised Catholic, and then there was sort of a detour into like light evangelism, I would say, and then that sort of fell by the wayside. My mom is someone who I think is spiritual, but is not necessarily a fan of organized religion at this point. And my father loves to read, and so he just got the itch and started buying books. I mean, just like ordering 5, 6, 7 books at a time, and he would read all of them about the history of the church and who might have written this book, and we think these 6 people actually wrote the book of John, and this was found in a cave, and it was written in this language, and this translation is different than this translation. He just got wrapped up in it from a lot of different angles, interested in a sociological way, and in a myth way, and in a spiritual way. So, I mean, I guess if you pick a major world religion, you can spend a lifetime studying it and engaging with it, because it's complicated as fuck. So,
I mean, Episcopalianism is related to Catholicism, right?
Yeah, so Episcopalianism, as far as I understand it, there's like Anglicanism in England, because there was a king that wanted to get a divorce, and he was like, so we're not Catholic anymore because I want to get a divorce. And then Episcopalianism is like what happened in America. That's an offshoot of that. They're cool. They have like gay lady bishops and stuff, but they still have the mass. And my dad is very considerate of, and feels, I think, very attached to liturgy as a concept, and ritual as being important to human beings as a way of sort of marking our lives and how they move. So he got interested in that. He went to seminary at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena. I pointed my finger, like, 1, like you would know what and where that was, and 2, like people could see me do that.
Also, technically, I think Pasadena is like that way.
Yeah, I'm completely disoriented right now.
You pointed to Burbank. See, I know some of the geography here.
Yeah, you're doing fine. You're doing great. And he got very interested in grief counseling and in end-of-life care and in death and how people die and how we, that final transition out of this mortal coil, that final shuffle. And so he studied a lot of last rites stuff and has worked in a lot of situations where people die.
Ugh.
Yeah.
It's the thing I've been trying to avoid thinking about.
Death?
Yeah.
It's coming.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Literally every time in the last, I have a birthday coming up, so it's particularly on my mind, but literally for a month or 2 now, every time I wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning to go to the bathroom, it pops into my head. Or yesterday I was listening to some Superchunk songs, and I was like, oh, there's going to be a time in your life when you can't hear these anymore because you won't exist. And just in these moments of when I'm vulnerable, the thought creeps into my brain and I can't do anything about it. Yep, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, have you ever had a dream where you die?
I'm sure I have. No, I usually live in, no, actually probably not. Because I was thinking of one, there's always been this dream that I remember the most where the moon crashes into the other side of the earth, and it's just my brain conjured up these brilliant psychedelic colors in the dream, and that's why it's stuck in my head. But I survived that. So
I want your dreams. That's beautiful.
No, why do you dream about? Do you die in your dreams?
I had a dream one time where I don't think that I died. I think I woke up, but I knew that I was about to be murdered.
Interesting.
And in the dream, I was really angry at myself. I remember thinking, why did I assume that this was going to happen any other way? Because there was only one way that this was going to happen, and I was just living my life as though I was going to live to be 100, and now this is happening, and I'm pissed off that I didn't, handle it differently or something.
So you were it was almost like a guilt kind of why didn't I know that this was gonna did you ever fuck up in real life and you
No.
and afterwards you're like, I should have known not to do that, and if I had just thought about it for another extra second or so, I wouldn't have fucked up like this.
Yes.
Yeah. So was it like that kind of thing in your dream?
It was exactly that feeling, which is an interesting parallel because I couldn't have known that I was going to die. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when I fuck up, it's you could have known you were going to fuck up if you had thought it through, but you didn't. And there's no possible way to go back and make it so that you had the forethought. So it's a similar experience, actually.
Yeah, it's the same kind of like your stomach kind of like drops out from under you. That kind of like, I hate that feeling. I've done everything in my life to avoid feeling that.
And has it worked? You never have to feel that feeling ever again?
I mean, I'm sure I will. I'm sure I'm going to fuck up badly and be like, why didn't you? But also like I don't take a lot of risks. I don't take more risks than, I've taken some risks. Obviously, like having a creative career is a big risk. But other than that, I'm somewhat conservative because I hate that feeling so much. It's so Pavlovian. It's like, I hate this feeling. So I'm going to like walk a wide berth around anything that could create that feeling in me.
You seem to have a very strong survival instinct.
My family, we're small Jews. I'm sure to last into the 21st century, that is something that's been bred into us to exist through, from biblical times all the way up to now. I'm sure my mom's family comes, you can trace her back to like one of the tribes of Israel. So I'm sure that's a thing that she's had, that we've, that's genetically in me. Some chromosome is like, watch out, buddy.
Don't run into the street. Don't tell that person you have a crush on them. Don't say a stupid comment.
Yeah, you literally everything that, mostly the like, don't tell people you have a crush on them.
Yeah. That's not a good way to survive though. If you're trying to procreate, evolutionarily speaking, at some point you have to tell someone you have a crush on them.
Yeah. Well, you're seeing the flaw in this.
Yeah, it's true.
But, so what made your dad interested in end of life stuff? Because I brought that the stuff up that I was talking about because like I'm so frightened of it, and I do whatever I can in my life to distract myself from physical and biological destiny.
My dad, through the church that he and my mom were going to, met somebody who was, I think, fully paralyzed in their body and had a lot of health issues. And my dad would go and read to and with this guy and just kind of hang out with him. And he passed. And I think that being in that space, I mean, I know that my father has had experiences with death with people that he loves, just like all humans do over the course of their lifetime. But I think that my dad started to see it as a space where there is work to be done. And so I think just like with, I've figured out how to write a song and thought I could be maybe pretty good at this. I think that my dad figured out that he could be pretty good at being someone who's there for something that many people don't want to deal with and are terrified of, and thought that maybe he could learn how to be a comfort and to sort of look at the reality of our end kind of head on as much as possible. So,
I mean, has it made you more comfortable with the concept?
I suppose I don't feel particularly uncomfortable. I think that I want very much to live, and I enjoy it a great deal these days, and I hope that it goes on for a good long minute, and I hope not to suffer too much, just like anybody else. But I also think that the end is coming, and
oh God,
I'm sorry.
I mean, no, you're absolutely right. It's just
I feel peaceful about it, and I feel sometimes I feel scared, but mostly I feel like there are more important things to be doing, and sometimes people are called on to do important things where they have to completely disregard that instinct to survive because, maybe they have a child that they are trying to protect with their life, or, people all over the world are in extreme situations every day, all the time. So I feel like the fact that I have lived in just about complete physical security for the 24 years that I've been here is an anomaly, and I'm happy about it, but I don't want to take it for granted.
And when you said you dipped, I don't know if this is your phrase exactly, but you guys dipped into evangelicism for a little bit. Was that how old were you when that happened, and did it affect you much? Like how you said, I think you said evangelism light or something like that.
Yeah, like non-denominational. There's a pastor with a goatee and a Hawaiian shirt.
So
Christianity.
Ed Hardy.
Yes, there are some people who will maybe hear this for whom they will go, yes, like youth group. I don't know. Forest Square Church. That was for probably, I should also say my parents were divorced for 5 years when I was a kid, from 5 to 10. So I'd say that time in that church was like 10 through 14, maybe 9 through 14.
Wait, so they got divorced when you were 5?
Yeah.
Then got back together when you were 10?
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask, like, what led to the divorce and what led to them eventually reconciling?
Sure. I don't know what led to the divorce aside from relationships are hard. And, living with someone seems really difficult, even if you love them a great deal. And my dad had a job that required he'd drive 2 hours to his job every day and then 2 hours back.
Yeah.
So I think that was stressful for everyone involved. And they got remarried. My dad was in the reserves of the Marines, and in 2004 he was activated, and he went to Iraq in that capacity as a Marine. And he and my mom started writing letters and corresponding while he was there. But they were very thoughtful. And when he came home, he just moved back in basically. But they had a very thoughtful divorce. They whenever we would hand off, my brother and I would spend weekends there at my dad's house, which was in, Oceanside, California, near San Diego.
Okay.
But the halfway point was the town where they met. So we would meet in the town where they met, and we would walk around the block and get a pastry together as a family, and then we would get in one car or the other car and go to the other parent's house. Like, they were just really took pains to make sure that there was a sense of family that remained intact. And I think that when my dad was in Iraq, my mom was sort of like, well, like, it's the father of my kids, and like, this is kind of this is something that's bringing us maybe closer to a feeling of vulnerability to death, and so we're going to embrace that closeness and not take it lightly. And that was some kind of healing, I guess. They're still together. They're happy. I mean,
because it seems like when he came back, then that's when your family got a little more religious.
Yeah, I think that, my mom has been in various religious, she has been religious for a long time. And I don't think that my dad practiced very much as a young adult. My mom would be in Christian groups as a young adult. But yeah, we as a family going to church was kind of started when they got back together. Yeah.
How did that feel for you? Because I don't know if you are spiritual or not, but evangelicism seems like the pretty hardcore edge of Christianity.
Yeah, I really, really embraced it and got very, very involved in the youth group. And then I started going to Catholic school. And so I was just in that all of the time. And I'm still working through all of that, I would say. Yeah.
So you bought into, so it wasn't like you were like, well, I guess I have to go to this because of my family. You actually felt it. I was about to say, did I say it? I may have said it out loud, bought into it. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to be so.
No, that's okay. I did feel it. I mean, I think that those churches and many organized groups, any group that wants you to join it, or like, evangelism as a prospect in America is fairly capitalist in that it is kind of the explicit aim of a lot of these churches to be expanding always and to be recruiting always. So they make themselves very, very friendly places to be. And I don't want to imply that anybody having a sincere experience in that environment is, misled. But I think that I was kind of a roly-poly smart nerd kid who didn't have a lot of pals, maybe. And this was an environment where suddenly I had a lot of pals, and we would go to church camp, and that was fun when we weren't speaking in tongues or crying. And
so it was like Pentecost kind of.
Yeah, there was like a touch of it. It was like a dash of Pentecostalism. It wasn't like essential. It was just a thing that was kind of an element that was there. So yeah, I was very involved in that for a few years, and I think it was not. I think that there's a lot of shame, and there's a very strong culture that says, no sex before marriage, and it's pretty homophobic and demands just a particular type of lifestyle. And I think that it took me a minute to be out in the world and to observe that lots of people weren't living that way, and to think, well, these people all seem fine. It doesn't seem like the gays are that tortured inside. Like they're just sweet people doing their life. And then, so it took me a long time to open up to those things in myself, for example. Yeah, I don't know. I'm still processing that whole thing.
I mean, what was the I don't know if there was a moment, but was there ever a point where you're in this kind of conceptual scheme? Sorry to describe this stuff.
No, I think that's a perfect way to describe
dryly,
it.
But this kind of evangelical conceptual scheme that does label certain people as you have certain rules to follow. Certain people are, I was going to say good or bad, but I guess evil. Actually, there's a moral kind of a label thrown onto them. What's the process of you coming? And I know you just said I would see people who the church labeled as evil or whatever, and be you don't seem like bad people. Mm-hmm. But what was the process of getting out from under that? I know you said you're still doing it, but how? I just don't. I've never had. The reason why I'm kind of struggling with the question, or trying to figure out how to phrase it, I've never had that feeling. Mm. I was. I'm Jewish. I raised Jewish. Going to temple every week, and. But I never believed it, and I never not going to temple was never, except for my parents' expectations, it was never a problem. I was just well, that's just it's boring. It's always been boring. I don't really get a lot out of this, and there was never a kind of deeper feeling. So it was fairly easy for me to just be yeah. I mean, except for arguing with my parents about Israel or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's just never, it's never been a problem. So how did you, what was the process for you of leaving those concepts behind, or that conceptual scheme behind?
Well, I think that with most things in my life, there's I hold my convictions and my beliefs very deeply, I tend to, but I also think that I am a believer in flexibility and in being open to new information, and I think I've sort of always been that way. And so I think that I've always had friends that weren't within that framework, and that was useful, just in terms of information of, okay, well, these people are living differently. And I got to college. I went to USC to study music. And I thought, I don't think that I need to. I went to church maybe a handful of times during college, but I was just really, I was like, this isn't doing anything for me. This feels like there's a culture that I don't feel like I really belong to. I don't know how I would belong to it. And at the same time, I was spending a lot of time with creative people and with people whose genders and whose sexual orientation identities weren't, would not have fit into that schematic. And so it was gradual and in that way not so difficult. I don't think I had any sort of like torturous, shame-filled experiences, because I think that spirituality for me is in a lot of ways, it's like if you believe some of the things that they say, like if you think that acceptance or love is a higher value, then you start to notice where the institutions that are promulgating their ideas fall short of the values that they purport to live by.
Yeah, I've always like the thing that I've never been able to figure out, and it's probably because I'm Jewish, but also just like the kind of and I've never been within Christianity to, there's like the big message that I see is love and acceptance and compassion, right? Isn't that the big thing? And then there's like maybe like one or two sentences somewhere in the Bible that are like, gay people are bad, whatever that is. And I'm just like, how do you let those two sentences override the like theme of this entire book that's supposed to be the foundation of your religion? And I've just never been able to wrap my head. I mean, obviously like people are complicated things, we all live with contradictions. Like I get like that part. I'm not like, how do you have these two ideas in your head? I'm just like, how do you let the larger theme and the larger, the foundational idea of the religion kind of like get washed over by like a couple little fragments somewhere?
Yeah, well, I found them logically irreconcilable, that contradiction. I think that there are Christians who also find it irreconcilable and prefer to embrace the larger themes. But I also think that we have to contextualize, we're talking about Christianity in America, and we're talking about white patriarchal hegemony when we talk about Christianity in America. It's some enormous proportion of people in our Congress. Like if you're not religious but you're running for office, like you better be a Christian. And so I think that there's a distinction between a spiritual practice and a social order. But if your spiritual practice is in line with the dominant social order, then it is very difficult it was very difficult for me to feel like I could genuinely make that distinction in good conscience and say, well, I'm a Christian, but I'm not this, that, and the other that is generally characteristic of Christianity in the context that I was born into.
I mean, it's also interesting you mentioned before, and I never really thought about it because I've never thought about how I just accepted that there are mega churches, or there is what's the Christianity where it's like prosperity gospel, right?
Yes.
That's what it's called.
Yes.
Where it's like, no, God wants you to be rich. I don't know what this voice is that I keep taking for like.
It's your televangelist voice. That's yours.
Wait, shouldn't my televangelist voice be more like announcery? Christ wants you to be wealthy. But
I'm ready to give you a lot of money. Yeah.
But the idea, like I never really kind of connected the because I never really thought about it. Look, I'm very smart. I just want you to know this. I need you to know. But like the confluence of capitalism and Christianity in beyond just like the mega churches, beyond the prosperity gospel, into that kind of like always have to be growing, always have to be multiplying. That's not just like a proselytizing thing that comes out of Christianity. It's also a very specific kind of idea that comes out of, like, I guess, Protestant kind of thought here in the United States, at least.
Definitely. And I think, I mean, hopefully there's no one that actually studies this. People should just Google about this if they want to know more, because I'm not particularly educated in this way. I just, this is from my understanding of what I've observed as a person. But in a lot of ways, sort of this non-denominational evangelical, let's say white Christianity has often functioned over and against communism in the United States. And during the 60s, in a lot of ways, over and against the civil rights movement. Billy Graham is a very, very famous evangelical preacher. And he strategically would sort of conflate the civil rights movement with communism. And that was related to the spiritual landscape of the time. So it is related to capitalism. Those things are definitely related. And I think that part of what bothered me participating in the church was an absence of, and I guess any time you're participating in hegemony from a perspective that is in line with the dominant culture, receives the power or is privileged, is that there tends to be an absence of any kind of outside view. There's no one to contextualize it and say, here's what we're saying. And we're saying this because in the 1920s, somebody wrote a book that said, this is capitalism and it's so great. And God wants you to be rich. And then,
Well, that's specifically like talking about you. Like, how do you figure out who you are as a person within this larger hegemonic system that does not have an outside point of view?
Well, I think that we are all, as humans and as people born in America, have to struggle to do that. And I think that we observe in ourselves times when impulses that feel natural to us are sort of steamrolled in the wider conversation or in our social interactions. And I think that we need to observe where other people who we interact with and who we love are not able to sort of live as they would.
But if you're not, like, the thing is, like, if you don't know that there is another, like, if you don't know that you're being stifled, then how do you know? Like, I have a very dumb version of this all. Like, I always, like a weird kid in Pennsylvania, a weird Jew in Pennsylvania specifically. Like, you don't know that you're being stifled until, a decade and a half later. I say, I'll put it from, I didn't know, like, those impulses were like, I was conforming in certain cases till I got out from under Pennsylvania, or from Reading, Pennsylvania specifically. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it's okay to kind of like be weird or think, again, that's just the dumb version, but
I don't think that that's dumb at all. No offense.
I just meant, like, if you are trans or queer or like anything that, like, that's I take that as the more serious, like, version of like something deeper about your personality is being stifled by this hegemonic culture versus, like, I liked Weird Al. Like, that's why I called it dumb. Cause it's like, there's I think a large gulf between like some deep part of who you are as a person, versus, like some kind of, just being, culturally off. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think that I had my first big crush on a girl when I was like 12, and I dated a woman for the first time when I was 23. So I think a decade is a pretty appropriate amount of time for processing whatever type of, and I grew up in Los Angeles. I went to Catholic school, but like there were always, all of my friends were queer. I got to interact with sort of, I think, a wider spectrum of people than maybe if I'd grown up in a similar religious circumstance in a less diverse, I guess, part of the country, maybe. So I think that I did have outside input, and I also think that some stuff is in your gut, and I remember being like an 11-year-old and praying that my first kiss would not be with a girl.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know any gay people when I was 11. How could I have my parents never said anything homophobic really in the house. Like, they were never like, the gays shouldn't get married. Like, I don't think it came up a lot. It didn't come up in my world, but somehow this little kid picked up that this is something you're not supposed to be. And a layer beneath that, this little kid was like, I might be that. So I think, maybe you're just oriented to Weird Al from a young age, and you can't help it and then you don't know what kind of joy and relief there is until you find the other people and you're like, oh shit, you know all the words to the Eminem cover or whatever,
So, I mean, you grew up in, like, coming into, I was supposed to say city. It's not like it's Manhattan or something like that, but I guess there's the more city parts of Los Angeles. Like, are you, how I'm trying to, like, figure out, like, I'm orienting myself, like, West Hills, right? Is that what you said? Is it like New Jersey, like coming into the city?
I have no idea. The East Coast is a mystery to me. I've only ever lived here.
Is it like, do you feel like you're in this very suburban part and then you get to come into the city and there's this kind of like, oh, that now I finally get to see the kind of the expanse of existence, like all the different types of people you could possibly be and all the different like economic strata and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I had a car from a young age. My parents gave me a car, and so a lot of my friends, or several of my friends, had cars, so we were able to drive around the city starting in, middle, later high school. And so there was some awareness there. Also, like, the church would do homelessness outreach on Skid Row. So there was some awareness of a varied economic strata. I went to USC for college, and USC is the most expensive college, or maybe the second most expensive college in the country, and it's in West Adams, which is a historically black neighborhood in Los Angeles. And I think that observing the extremes of that environment, which is to say that there were a lot of people who went to college and were going to have no debt coming out of college, and there were a lot of people who were there on scholarship who had really worked their asses off in order to be there. And USC is terrible about scholarships. You'll be in your second year and they'll say, well, we don't have a scholarship for you anymore, full ride, kid. So it's a school that is run like a business and really values money.
Oh God, that was like when academia was starting to get like that when I went to grad school. It became, it definitely, like, I saw it as I went in the early 2000s to grad school, and I was studying philosophy, and suddenly the department had to justify itself. It was no longer like, you should study philosophy because it makes you a better person, and it's a foundation of, like, understanding how we exist and all this kind of stuff, right? It was a pre-law program because it also teaches logic, and you need logic. There are very, like, some of the skills to do, like close reading. You need that if you're going to be a lawyer or whatever. But like, it had to give itself an economic, like, all the humanities had to suddenly give themselves an economic purpose because it was becoming a business as opposed to a actual higher education. So yeah, so I understand. Yeah.
So yeah, that was that environment, and it was in a neighborhood where people who were in the neighborhood and students of color on campus were regularly profiled by campus police. There was an incident near the end of my freshman year where the Black Student Association was throwing a party. There were two houses, two parties right across the street from each other. One of them was kind of an arty punk house, would throw rock shows. and I had some friends that lived there. And then across the street, they were throwing a graduation party for all of the members of the Black Student Assembly. And people were going back and forth between these two parties. And the Black Student Assembly party was sanctioned with the school. They had school security there. They were checking IDs at the door. They were not serving alcohol. And then the party across the street, we were, it was wild and stupid and dirty, and we were not checking IDs, and people were doing drugs, and we were drinking, and I was underaged. And somebody called in a noise complaint, and a cop showed up to the party that I was at, like the arty punk party, and said, "Hey, can you guys settle down and go inside?" And nothing really changed. And I left, and then a few minutes later, I got a call from, or not a few minutes, like let's say a half an hour, an hour later, a call from friends, and they had sent like 50 cops in riot gear for the BSA party across the street. And then we started seeing footage on the internet the next day of like the president of the association was thrown to the ground by a bunch of cops while she was trying to talk to them. And students were called racial slurs by cops, and there were helicopters, and there was a wall of police. And so that incident was, really woke me up as a kid from West Hills. And the following weeks where student activists on campus were, and students who had experienced that night were organizing to have some kind of justice, to get their fellow students bail covered also, because students were arrested. And the LAPD changed their story multiple times. They said somebody threw a beer bottle at a cop car, and then it came out that there was no alcohol at the party, and then they said someone threw, it was actually a rock. It wasn't a beer bottle. For
the listeners, I just rolled my eyes.
Yeah, very, very eye roll worthy. So witnessing that, and then also witnessing the organization around it, and they did have the students campaign to both get all of the students who were taken to jail out of jail and get their costs and bail covered. And then they had kind of a panel where they brought LAPD and took them to task. And I don't necessarily know, I mean, it's an incomplete form of justice, but witnessing that was really very important for me as a person, both the incident and the trauma, but then also the people who mobilized after. And some of my good friends worked, and I wasn't very involved. I would go to things. I can't say that I'm an organizer by any stretch. I'm very socially anxious. I'm not good at inviting people to stuff, but
yeah, I try to. Well, no, I like when I volunteer for stuff, I try to do all, like, if I can do anything in the background.
Yeah, it's like,
if
please let me file papers.
I volunteered on a campaign in the midterms, and I had to do phone banking and canvassing, and I hate it. I did it because I'm like the person I was volunteering for, they were running against like a genuine Nazi, and I was like, I can't sit down and just let a Nazi win.
Yeah.
And the Nazi lost, so great. But I desperately hated canvassing and phone like the core of me, like it just like it tore it out of me. Mm-hmm. So I 100% get where you're coming from. And
there's growth in the discomfort too, and I don't want to discount that, but yeah, witnessing all of that was really, really influential to me, and sort of going, okay. And then I was living with people who were American Studies majors at USC. And so they were giving me books, and then I took a Black social movements class, and I took a class on Native Americans in America right now, like a contemporary class. And I learned a little bit, and I got to do some reading, and I got to sort of shift my lens. So college did really work for me in that way. Even though USC is kind of a creepy Stepford environment. Yeah.
So we're getting towards the end of the show, and I just want to hit this before we're done, but where did music enter? Because you said you went to school to study music. So like, where did that enter into? This is a dumb way of putting it. I was going to say like enter into your life. What I really mean is like on a deeper existential level, like, oh, this is something that means something that deeply means something to me, and I want to pursue it as a career in some way.
Yeah, I only applied to the one music school because my dad told me that I should, and because I had a crush on a boy that was also applying. He did not get in, but I did, and I said, I guess this is what... I mean, I think I've always known. I think music has just been a constant in my head and in the way that I interact with the world. It's usually playing. So... in my brain, there's usually music happening.
Oh, that's 100% my brain.
Yeah,
it's always a song at any time. The first song on your new album is going around in my head right now.
Sick. So. It's working. But so I think that it was very natural. I think that I am interested in many things, and this is the one thing I seem to be able to stick with, basically.
Were you writing music when you were a teenager? Like, when did you start like actually composing? Was it college?
When I was a little kid, I thought that you could take songs and write new words to them. I've been singing from crib times. And so I was making up songs as a kid as well. And like making up songs on the piano and writing down on sheet music, like trying to notate what I was creating. I think I wrote my first full song when I was like 15 or something, but it's kind of the only thing that I seem to do always. Because
you're great at writing melodies and catchy, unique melodies, and sure, if I can, I sweat when I compliment people, but like I'm just trying to like what is it that like. This may be unanswerable, but like that has, I mean, it's probably just like all these things we've been talking about that have kind of just like, what is it? When I listen to a lot of, whatever, I'll get sent a lot of demos or something, not demos, but like promos. And I'm just like, I'll listen and I'll be like, it's not bad. And, it's not offensive in any way. And but like what, people like you who write unique melodies, what's the thing that's like pushed you just like slightly off the course of like everyone else who's just going to write like, here's 4 chords and here's the melody is 2 notes or whatever. Like, do you know what I mean? I realize that's a broad generalization.
Yeah, I have no idea. I think that I sing to feel good, and I do it for fun. When it's working, and like the good stuff comes from just me being alone and experiencing my voice. So, yeah.
So okay, that might be it then. There might be a comfortability. Were you always comfortable with your voice? Were you always comfortable with singing? And confident in some way?
When I'm alone, yeah. I am a person who had pretty severe stage fright for a long time, but I love to sing. So yeah, I'd say at this point I feel very comfortable. And when I got a car and was able to sing along to things, that I think was also very important.
Well, that seems like a nice place to end.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Thanks for coming over here. I almost got into Andy. my prosperity gospel voice. Thanks for coming over and give me your money.
Yeah.
All right. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye, oh, bye.